Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, How Santander UK Accelerates Digital Initiatives by Mastering Customer Data. I'm Fred O'Connor, Customer Marketing and Partner Manager at Tamr. Today you'll hear from Jonathan Holman from Santander UK. He's the bank's head of digital transformation, corporate and commercial banking. He'll talk about why data mastering is a key part of Santander UK's digital transformation journey, the role machine learning plays in data mastering, and the business outcomes that Santander UK is achieving by mastering its customer data. Also joining the discussion today is Ravi Halasi of Tamr. Ravi is head of strategic sales engineering at Tamr and will be moderator. And with that, I'll hand things over to Jonathan.
Hi everybody, and glad to be with you today to share our experiences of using Tamr's technology to help achieve and accelerate our digital transformation. For those of you who don't know, Santander Group is a very large global institution centered on America, South America, and Europe, and we are 55 on the Forbes global list of the 2,000 leading companies. We've got 145 million customers, and more than 50% of those are now digital customers in some form or another. In the UK, we're a standalone bank with 14 million customers. We have about 100,000 SME or SMB customers and about 10,000 corporate customers. We have a core loan book of £22 billion of assets for UK companies. And last year we turned a profit of £981 million. So I'm going to talk you through corporate and commercial banking and my responsibility within that part of the bank of running digital and our transformation accelerated by digital, and how we've split up the core activities of the bank into various systems that we've brought together in one ecosystem. So there are 6 main activities that we have that dictate how we interact with our customers, and I'm going to display those to you now. So we're prospecting with customers to understand who we want to do business with. We then proceed to onboard them, taking them through credit decisioning and KYC and due diligence procedures. We then have some sort of fulfillment with the products and services that they've chosen to purchase from us and contracts that we put in place. And we then have to monitor the ongoing risk and interaction with those customers, as well as potentially deciding whether or not to exit the relationship if something changes materially in our dynamic. Those activities each have themes underneath them, and the grid that's now on screen shows you those. And basically, we're considering in each of these steps of the life cycle of managing a customer, how our strategy and whether our proposition fits with that customer, how our product and pricing will work, how our financial crime and money laundering risk profile might exist with those products and that customer, and how our credit risk profile might exist with that customer and the products and services they choose. And we've taken these activities across those 6 life cycle stages, and we've divided them up into where they best fit in terms of operational systems. The blue layer underneath prospecting is managed on Salesforce, and we think that the Salesforce Sales and Service Cloud are some market-leading technologies in that space. And it's the first piece of cloud SaaS software that we've installed to be able to help manage our customers. We've then built on that, adding to it with nCino, which is built on the Salesforce architecture, and that's a bank operating system which covers the vast majority of other tasks. And you can see the red on screen now that dictates where nCino covers the majority of activities that we have as a workflow system, as an operational and decisioning platform in our bank. The green layer underneath application forms and our product forms are where we've got customer-facing digital application processes that are quite complicated and dynamic, and we'll talk about more later on in the journey. And we've spent some significant time there trying to digitize and optimize those processes that face the customer. And lastly, we've got one more activity in the fulfillment space where we're putting contracts or security collateral documents in place with customers depending on the products that they've chosen. And we've chosen DocuSign and DocuSign CLM in those spaces to help produce contracts using the data from Salesforce and nCino, and then electronically signing those via DocuSign's signature portal. And together, all those systems make up what we call the core. And those 4 systems that manage our forms that face the customer, that manage the sales and servicing processes, that manage the operational credit risk and financial crime processes, and then help fulfill those with customers. Those are the day-to-day systems that our relationship banking teams operate in, that face our customer, and that are horizontal capabilities in that they exist across all of the products and services that we sell. So now I'm going to discuss in more detail the 4 components of that core system that underpin those 6 life cycle stages of our interactions with our customers. So first up is the digital services. So these are the services that face our customers and help them interact with our products and services, either up front when they're applying for them or on an ongoing basis. So these are things like our onboarding process, which is digitized and online now, the e-signature processes that I talked about through DocuSign, and then we have particular product portals or channels for online banking, for doing transactional banking, for placing deposits, for maybe conducting foreign exchange business with the bank, or for particular asset-based products such as trade finance or invoice finance, where the customer might be required to upload particular documentation or decide to draw down on a loan at any one time. Our products, our income, our customer relationships are managed on our CRM system, like many institutions. And as I said, we've chosen Salesforce to be the center of our ecosystem, more than just for its Service Cloud and Sales Cloud capabilities that we employ, but for its ecosystem, its app exchange, and its hub that we can use for all of the activities and all of the data that we hold about a customer, linking that together. DocuSign and DocuSign CLM, formerly Spring CM, these are the tools that we use for document production, for that contract creation, e-signing, and they sit both alongside Salesforce and alongside the last box, Encino, which are our 2 main operating platforms. Encino builds on the Salesforce ecosystem using data and the same customer record from the CRM, but gives you KYC, smart checklist functionality, document storage, as well as crucially credit risk decisioning workflow that helps us execute the processes that are around our main lending products. We can then take that data into documentation that we negotiate online with customers using DocuSign, and all of that brings together a single customer view that underpins it from all of our core banking platforms. And this is where things begin to get tricky for us in materializing those 4 core systems that display data to our relationship teams or to our customers. We have to have a consolidated single customer view feeding into those platforms from our core banking and core product systems in order to make it coherent and able to be used in automated workflows in those platforms. So on this slide, I'm going to give you a view of our architecture overall, and that core that we talked about on the previous slide of those 4 main systems, how it's able to take external data and internal data in an aggregated view to be able to achieve the consolidated outcomes that we want, where our colleagues and our customers can work in one layer that comes across as not 4 systems or more than 4 systems, but as a continuous layer of joined up systems that operate in an ecosystem together. So the external layer of data in our architecture is plugged into that middle layer, and it's made up of different types of data that we use to complete different processes. So we've got entity data, which helps us with our due diligence and our credit risk. We've got accounting data and open banking data, which has recently come online in the UK, which we can help automate our credit risk processes using. We can also automate our monitoring of customers by feeding that data into that core layer in the middle. We've got financial crime and legal checks that we need to do based on screening of politically exposed individuals, as well as sanctioned individuals or companies. And we've also got global versions of entity data and identity data for individuals that are also used in our KYC processes if we're dealing with people outside the UK. All of those data services we used to access via portal if they did exist, and we used to download PDFs or check them manually by searching, and we can now access these services via API. And so generally we connect all of those external data services via API, and sometimes we even aggregate them together using RegTech aggregation services to help deduplicate and to help synchronize the searches that we do between different platforms for the same customers or the same individuals associated with our corporate customers. And then we can feed that data into the Salesforce and Encino operational layer and use that data to either surface to customer in our onboarding processes, getting them to validate publicly available information rather than enter it. And also we can use it to pre-populate the facility letters and contracts that we have in our document production system. And then to our internal layer, which sits beneath our architecture, we've got our systems of core customer record. And unfortunately, as a bank that's got different divisions and has had different acquisitions over time, we've got 4 of those now. And then we've got all of our product systems, which you can see on the bottom layer, which each exist in their own specialist product booking system. We aggregate all that data now into the data lake, which is indicated by the slightly darker gray box all around them. And we've got different tools upon the data lake, such as machine learning, such as visualization tools, but also Tamr helping us to auto reconcile and create that single customer view from that data lake data, which we can surface in the core layer of Salesforce and Encino in the middle. So to talk a bit more about that, our customer record systems, we've got one in retail, we've got one in corporate banking, we've got Salesforce, which has its own unique customer identifier, and we've also got one in our investment banking division. And we use some of the investment banking products to sell to our SME and our corporate customers, and therefore they have to be onboarded into that division of the bank as well as the primary division through which they've joined via a relationship team. So reconciling the individual records and the company records across those 4 areas of the bank is the main task for which we employed Tamr. And we do that by depositing customer records from all of those systems into the data lake and letting Tamr look for common customers across those 4 systems, as well as duplicates within those systems. And we can then surface the results of those aggregated aliases that exist across different unique identifiers in those different systems into the CRM, meaning that we can not have any duplicate customer records and be confident when we're undertaking due diligence or credit risk or pricing activity that we understand holistically the services and products the customer buys from us. But also when surfacing the data about the products to the customers, we can do that with confidence too, knowing that online portals will show the correct data associated with any one customer record. We then use that consolidated data from various product systems, which may be linked to one or both of those, or one or more than of those core customer record unique identifiers from the product systems. And we can then use that data in finance reporting, in credit risk and regulatory reporting, but also in building machine learning models, which help us to understand maybe credit risk profile or customer propensity for a particular product, as well as in visualization software where the deduplication that Tamr helps us achieve is also important. And those things we're beginning to surface back in the ecosystem of Salesforce and Encino now, keeping the front office colleagues and our credit risk colleagues, our product colleagues, middle office colleagues, able to work in one environment, no matter which lens or which activities they're completing for the customer. On the left and right hand side, you can see more detail about the digital services that we have facing the customer and some of the other decision engines that we have plugged into Encino, which help us understand financial crime risk ratings, credit risk ratings, and also help automate our credit risk decisioning. If we didn't have the single customer view being fed in to Encino from the data lake facilitated by Tamr, we wouldn't be able to feed that information downstream into those decision or risk rating engines to be able to understand maybe the capital we need to hold, or indeed the financial crime risk profile and the implications of that, the amount of due diligence we have to do for our customers. So it's crucial to be able to underpin this architecture that you're able to reconcile your core data together.
Jonathan, there's quite a variety of external reference data being pulled in to support the core layer, not to mention the challenges of bringing in open banking data feeds. Can you talk a bit about some of the operational challenges you faced in onboarding this data?
Yeah, it's a good point. So UK data tends to operate via company's house and the company's house registration number. And so we use that as a unique identifier for external data, and we can reconcile and pull that in via Tamr from our UK data sources. Where that has been entered into accounting data, we're able to then pull accounting data from customers with permission and reconcile that against the same records. But it becomes harder with global data for entities where maybe an LEI is used on a global basis, or a unique customer reference, a unique company reference in a particular jurisdiction. And so we have to try and have multiple aliases that can exist against the company, and obviously Tamr helps us do that. With open banking, we're tending to understand that customer and be permissioning the data. But again, between the different banks, there isn't one unique reference apart from those external references like a company registration number that can be used to identify a particular business, and the transactions that one might be able to pull, or the products information that one might be able to pull from open banking. And so we have to use many unique identifiers to reconcile this together. And the tasks that Tamr are performing isn't just now across those internal systems and the internal data and maybe the complexity that we've created for ourselves within the organization, but the complexity that exists within a global as well as a multi-platform digital ecosystem that exists outside of the bank that we're now integrating tightly with.
Yeah, that's been our experience as well. There's certainly no one unique identifier to rule them all in a particular jurisdiction, let alone globally.
Indeed. It's a very real task and something that is there to take advantage of if you can reconcile the data sets together. So now I wanted to drill down into a bit more detail about some of our digital journeys that we've created across that ecosystem and let you see how each of the component parts plays its role in joining together to create a digital journey. So if we take our onboarding of customers, there's a sequence of our systems that starts with Salesforce and the prospecting activity, but very quickly leads us into inviting the customer into a process of completing due diligence and understanding their business. Now we do this by checking them using DueDil and understanding their registered data and their profile, the risk that we might encounter from a financial crime perspective as a result of doing business with this customer. And we pre-populate that data into some Quadient-based forms that exist on our internet site with a secure login. When the customer logs in, they're able to validate external data. And once they've done that and chosen the products that they'd like to onboard to, they can then complete the mandate and authorize that application with lots of people signing in parallel on DocuSign. That's where we think our application process on digital onboarding is quite clever, in that while the customer thinks they're DocuSigning, the data from Quadient and some various RegTech-based API checks that we do on the data entered into the forms, we pull it into nCino and begin our downstream workflow to open the accounts and complete the due diligence. So nCino takes all that data and it is able to complete a risk assessment against the customer and help any subjective assessment of whether or not that application makes sense for that business. And we can pass the data into our robotic process automation, which figures out the level of back office due diligence that might be undertaken, as well as the products that need to be opened, and passes that data into our core banking platform, removing the need for anyone to manually retype it and allowing for data continuity from the external data source from DueDil all the way through Quadient, nCino, the RPA, and into our core banking platform. The data from our core banking platform is surfaced back in Salesforce from our data lake and helps reconcile the work that was in progress for a case that was being opened via onboarding into one that's now completed with an opportunity closed, with having that feedback loop into Salesforce from our core banking platform. And so the customer's got a nice digital journey there. They've been able to DocuSign and work in parallel where there's lots of people signing around the world. And we've been able to work in parallel to them, completing our downstream workflow. Again, the single customer view that allows the external data with our internal record that's being created during this process, as well as the Salesforce prospect record, allowing all of those to be joined together on the fly to make sure that by the end of the process, Salesforce has an awareness and is able to feed back into the process of which customer is represented by which IDs, and linking those all together in the system is a crucial element which Tamr has helped us be able to achieve. We've now also digitized our credit risk proposals, and they start in much the same way, in that we're prospecting customers and products that we would like to offer to them in Salesforce, and we create a pipeline of those activities, and then we can potentially create a credit risk prospect with an entity profile, perhaps a group profile and security structure from the external data from DueDil into nCino. nCino is where we can then complete a credit risk application, complete the credit risk rating of the entity and understand the capital we'd have to hold against the lending, as well as the covenants and security structure that we might put in place and the pricing of any assets that we would offer to the customer. We can then supplement that data from external sources and registered data like Companies House available via DueDil with permission data that we might gather from customers' accounting packages, and we use Validus as an account software aggregation engine to pull data into nCino from customers' accounting packages. And we also use a piece of software plugged into nCino called BizAnalyzer, which is able to do complete electronic reading of PDF financial statements that might be supplied to us, indicating a customer's performance over time, which we can then analyze in nCino, having imported the data via BizAnalyzer. Now we're able to add via Fractal Labs integrated into nCino open banking data, and that helps us understand the customer's transactions and make sure that we can reconcile those against the accounting entries we've seen in their accounting software data, and also look for any other behavioral anomalies or positive points in their cash flow that helps us make sure we're assigning the right products and the right risk profile to this business. And all of that leads us to be able to make a credit risk decision in nCino, either via credit committee for large exposures or an automated decision for smaller exposures, where all of this data that has been gathered during the process to date has been taken into account. After we've made a credit risk decision, we then need to fulfill those products and services, and that involves putting a contract in place and taking the security or collateral on file, maybe registering that with the relevant regulatory body. So nCino can pass its data from the credit risk decision about the products, about the entities, about the jurisdiction in which those entities live and the relevant legal framework, as well as things like covenants and conditions of those facilities, and pass them through to DocuSign CLM, where the data can be used to produce relevant documentation and contracts that can even be negotiated online with customers. Once the documents have been agreed, the documents move through CLM into DocuSign e-signature portal, where they could be executed by 1 or 2 directors, whatever is relevant to the particular entity type. And we receive those documents back into the document manager functionality in nCino. We're then able to draw down onto a particular loan system their product or service that's been sold and mark the appropriate limits. And then we're going to be feeding back into nCino from a product booking system like Alpha, a loan record that now exists against a Salesforce and nCino customer record, and also against a KYC record that takes place on our core banking systems. And so you can see there that we've got 3 or 4 unique identifiers that all need to be reconciled by Tamr back into nCino to understand that that facility now exists in the core banking platform, that it's been fulfilled from the credit risk sanction that was granted, and that everyone understands the income and the profile of that customer all in one place for future financial crime and credit risk reviews. So of the diagram that I showed you earlier, I've color-coded here what's live in our ecosystem now. Not all of them are as interconnected as I'd like with APIs, but we continue to work month by month, year by year to extend that out. And we've made huge progress by using SaaS and cloud-based solutions to deliver lots of functionality and integrate it live very quickly. So Tamr has been live now for about a year, and we've connected together all of the platforms that you see underneath it, as well as the core customer records, our BDP and GBO systems on the left. And that's in our internal data layer, some of which the platforms in yellow we're upgrading as well into new cloud-based versions, which should make the iteration of those pieces of software as easy as we find it with Tamr and other pieces of SaaS that are developing over time. We're then consolidating that data into that live middle layer of Quadient, of Salesforce, of DocuSign, and of nCino. And to that, we've got connected either some on-prem or some SaaS-based decision engines and risk rating platforms. The external data that we've gathered is all live and tends to be cloud and SaaS-based services, but we're in the process of connecting most of those via API to that middle layer. The vast majority are either connected directly, and DueDeal, Validus, Fractal Labs are examples of connected APIs that are connected directly into nCino, whereas the right-hand side, the reg techs tend to be aggregated via Encompass, which is our chosen reg tech aggregation partner, which pulls together lots of data from disparate sources in the KYC and due diligence space into Salesforce and nCino, helping us understand in one fell swoop the customer from a lot of different financial crime angles.
Jonathan, you mentioned some systems were upgraded. How much of a work from past legacy system integrations was carried forward into the new platform?
Yeah, so most of our SaaS providers are updating software multiple times a year, and we have to sort of stay in sync with those upgrade cycles. And generally, it's been the case that on-prem installations of our legacy kit have not had upgrades because it's become too architecturally cumbersome, perhaps application logic is tightly linked with data, as well as tightly linked with the user interface. And so regression testing after changing any one part of the system often leads to a vast expense of testing across the whole platform, which is crucial to sort of underpinning our day-to-day banking operations. And so we try to create a cloud architecture that operates in parallel to that, taking the data from those core banking systems via Tamr into it. And so we don't need to necessarily have too much ongoing upgrades to the existing kit, instead using middleware or modern technology on top of it to be able to deliver iterative functionality and improvements.
It's a common challenge we see. Many legacy applications, especially those being deployed on-prem, become stale. And especially with, it's a common challenge that we see with legacy applications becoming stale, and this has a knock-on effect over data. So I think that's a good example of where using more SaaS platforms allows for both the applications and the data to stay up to date.
Yeah, it's crucial. And also we're finding that there's a sort of interconnected relationship between lots of our chosen partners. So there's a sort of winner that emerges in each space. Obviously, Salesforce and nCino are inherently linked, having been built on the same platform. But DocuSign have got apps that run on the App Exchange on Salesforce. Judil and Validus, Fractal Labs have all built either nCino or Salesforce apps. And there's often tightly coupled pairings between lots of these providers and their propositions where they can work together in harmony. And that means that the integrations that one might use are also pre-built, and you're able to leverage to integrate the platforms and surface the data far faster. The continuity of data is one massive step, and then Tamr helps us in that final step of piecing it all together to make sure we've got a holistic understanding and a single customer view. So what I've tried to emphasize in this architecture and in the digital journeys that we've been creating is that the business case for mastering customer data and having that single customer view is really the underpinning of the whole of the rest of the piece. If we didn't have a single customer view and we weren't able to surface from a myriad of product systems and a myriad of sort of legacy and inherited acquired systems that we've got in the bank, all the data that was relevant to a customer, and bring it all together, then we wouldn't have the ability to operate in a sort of digital format where we're putting that data in front of customers, or indeed trying to automate as much as possible processes and decisions from our customer. All of that requires reliable and reconciled data that one can employ. Our nCino project was the catalyst to help deliver our single customer view project using Tamr, and the two were very much intertwined. But it was a problem that the bank had grappled with for a long time. And although there had been remediation attempts to remove duplicates or to help control operational processes more tightly that created duplicate records between the 4 customer record systems that we had, without automation at scale, without understanding those and linking them together, you're not really going to be able to manage it in the longer term, and eventually things will become error filled and duplicates will begin to exist again, and you find yourself back in another remediation project. So having something that was sustainable was very important, and building the business case inquired looking back at remediation attempts and efforts that have gone in the past, and whether or not they had been successful or not, and how often they might need to be repeated in future. And so just to summarize what has gone into our master records, into our golden records that we create, we've got lots of those product booking and core customer record systems in the bank. We're trying to consolidate some of those at the moment, but some of them carry unique references from one of the division's core customer record systems, which helps to reconcile against them. But some of them don't, and only carry the customer's name and address, and so the product booking systems become much like another core customer record system that we have to reconcile against, and Tamr is helping us do that in many instances. We've then got Salesforce and our modern cloud stack with its own unique customer reference number, which is good, but creates an additional one to the ones that we already had, and therefore requires those aliases to exist against it in Tamr for the other customer records. And we do indeed surface in Salesforce those other customer unique reference numbers, so that any of the underlying systems can be referred to and jump to quickly if anything particular needs to be understood, or perhaps people like using the UI from a legacy piece of software. Otherwise, you can see that we've got government and registered data, potentially external pricing or trading related information that's taking place in the investment bank. All of that coming from external sources to our own systems, that we also need to reconcile in. And those might be on different unique customer reference numbers, and potentially have different fields against which a Tamr model of reconciliation of entity or individual data might be built. But they're all important to be able to create something holistic, particularly when you're considering an AI model that's going to have lots of external data in there, which will help you predict maybe the macro environment which a company might find itself in, how its peers are doing, and how it might perform in future, anticipated via that AI. And here's to summarize the challenges that one might face. I think everyone will know that manual solutions require a huge amount of effort and don't really scale. I think everybody's probably dealt with thousands and hundreds of thousands of duplicate records across many different divisions of the bank, and the lack of joined up vision and service that you can offer to the customer as a result of those duplicate issues. We can find ourselves very easily with our retailing and our corporate banking core systems with the same number representing, we have an eight-digit customer reference number representing different entities and different individuals in each part of the bank, but they could actually have, coincidentally the same reference number. And so tricky things like that can cause confusion in systems and need to be worked around, and we're using Tamr to help us do that. And all of this leads to inefficiency, slow reporting, cost and manual reconciliation. And all those things are things we're trying to avoid as we try to automate many of the mundane reporting, MI, data science and machine learning type tasks, as well as just a single customer view that we want to surface to our colleagues and our customers in our core systems.
Jonathan, I'd also add that we often see that the needs of a golden record vary across different groups, for example, retail versus corporate, but there's often a requirement for that core master data to be used as that source of truth to derive those golden records, especially when taking into account challenges such as data sovereignty. When you've been developing these golden records, have you had similar challenges?
Yeah, so good examples are individuals that are associated as directors with limited companies that might bank in the corporate bank, and those same individuals who've got retail customer accounts and a retail customer record in another division. We might be doing financial crime screening, due diligence, ID&V across both retail and corporate. And before a single customer view, we're not able to share that data backwards and forwards. So we might be duplicating the screening effort. We might be coming up with different financial crime verdicts. We might be completing ID&V on an inconsistent basis, perhaps duplicating it for the customer. So all those problems can be avoided by reconciling the single customer view across the systems, across the different divisions. And therefore, even if the different parts of the bank do have different needs, they can all refer back to the same record and not duplicate wherever it's unnecessary to do so.
Great, that's an excellent and scalable process for sure. Thanks.
I'd sum up our outcomes of having achieved the master customer record that we need for Salesforce and Encino, that we're able to make better, informed, more automated loan decisions. We're obviously able to meet our regulatory requirements where we're reporting against any individuals or entities, particularly from a financial crime perspective. And then we're also don't have to clog up our chief data office or our our IT staff and their resources with requests to manually handle this, to get exception reports about duplicates, to be able to process those duplicates and remove them, or indeed accommodate the fact that duplicates might exist in various systems integrations. Instead, from the data lake into that core layer, we can assume that there is a deduplication taking place from Tamr, and we can deal with any exceptions and mergers that need to be created via a report, but those diminish very quickly as the systems find the load when you first install them, but after that, operational controls and the new systems using a single customer view prevent recreation of those duplicates in future. I thought it might be good to give you a sense of the strategy that I've employed in digitizing and transforming Santander UK in the corporate and commercial bank. Overall, we've had different phases in which we've been executing our plan, and we're not through all of those yet. And then we've had an approach of how we plan to execute those phases. So I'll deal with each of those in turn. My function is aligned to and integrated within the business, and we're a digital function that supports the business activities. And we think that's crucial to be able to be aligned to the strategy of the business and make sure we're delivering on behalf of the business, not on behalf of an IT team with different objectives. So as I've said throughout, SaaS software that's iterating where the roadmap is aligned to what you want to achieve in future, as well as the functionality delivers what you want to achieve now, we think is an excellent way of accelerating one's digital transformation without having to build software to achieve each task when there's specialist software out there that exists for those particular functions. Even if it hasn't been employed in your industry yet, you'll often find that there has been the same problem solved in another industry or by a piece of SaaS software. And I think we're fortunate to come around at a time where SaaS does exist and one can make big jumps in digital and technology capability by employing the software that other people have created. Obviously, cloud plays a big part in that software, hosting it and making it accessible. That's been particularly useful during the COVID situation, where we've had to operate remotely, and the fact that most of our stack is cloud hosted and accessible on lots of different devices from any location has given us flexibility that we wouldn't have otherwise enjoyed. And it allows for that continual update to take place easily for the SaaS software that is a feature of many of our providers, and as I say, allows us to buy into a roadmap rather than just static functionality at any one time. And then data continuity and the data-driven approach that we want to take for our decision-making, for our relationships with customers. These things are achieved by APIs, which help achieve that continuity, and Tamr, which helps reconcile those things together. We can then add to the data and the profile of the entities by using things like AI and machine learning to both help do that reconciliation, but also to take advantage of the insights that are apparent in that data, which maybe we haven't been able to take advantage of before through lack of computing power or the scale of the data. And that's enabling us to work in 3 phases of digital transformation. The first phase I call faster horses, like the Henry Ford quote, where we're delivering basically the same goods and services that we do today, but we're doing those in a more standardized, more streamlined, more efficient, more automated way. And digitization helps us achieve that. But the byproduct of digitization is that we then have the data in our core systems like Salesforce and Encino. We've digitized the processes to be able to understand each parameter of them. We can then add AI with that data, trained using decisions that are made by humans in the past or in the systems, looking at trends of outcomes for particular customer profiles, the products and the credit risks that they carry. And we can then predict and anticipate and automate some of the decisions, some of the product needs that our customers have, and deliver those via the sort of more certain execution modes that you have from phase 1, where you're just trying to speed up the existing processes that you had. And then finally, we're thinking about putting the intelligent distribution, that AI, that certainty of execution from phase 1 together in a phase 3, where we might think about how our products themselves could become more dynamic and suit our customers. So if you think about this in parallel with the music industry, MP3 is faster horses, the same products that you might buy today, might have bought previously on CD, but available faster and remote in a digital format. Intelligent distribution, well, that's Spotify adding algorithms that help determine your music taste and anticipate what new music you might like to listen to, what playlist and what mood you might be in. And then a dynamic service is something like what Netflix is doing now, where they're watching viewer habits and they are curating content based on things, storylines that people like and viewing habits that people have. And they're also beginning to experiment, as I'd imagine that music will in the future as well, with dynamic content. And so they've had TV series and feature-length productions where you can choose your storyline, and that's sort of allowing the product itself to respond to a viewer preference. In banking, that would be having dynamic products, maybe a deposit product, maybe a borrowing working capital product, maybe a foreign exchange product that flex to be able to suit the needs of a customer, as well as having anticipated those using the AI from phase 2. So we're beginning to think about what that could look like. And again, none of that would be possible without reconciling lots of data together and having that a single customer view underpinning all the models that will drive these future innovations.
That's interesting, Jonathan, because I can see that the overall strategy, especially around data and the dynamic products that you mentioned, both rely on machine learning and artificial intelligence. We still see a lot of skepticism around using these approaches compared to traditional methods, especially concerning the relative opacity of rules versus models. What have you experienced and how have you built confidence internally within the bank to use them going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you can get into territory that's quite dangerous quite quickly with, claiming that these are black boxes that no one understands. There are some very subtle relationships in a neural net which might be difficult to explain, but they're really statistical relationships. And so both in using Tamr and in the machine learning that helps statistical techniques to match records and cluster them together, we try and help people understand that really it's iterating through many different experiments with normal statistical techniques that you might be familiar with, fuzzy logic or clustering, iterating through those at speed that machine learning is really helping us to do. And then when it's more complicated decision-making parameters, that really we're looking for statistical relationships. They're the same sort of relationships that we might have a gut feel for over years of maybe doing financial crime or credit risk assessment. And then we try and make the models as explainable as possible so that the key factors that influence any one decision against any one customer, that they're able to be exported from the model and understood, and their weighting in the overall decision understood. And generally there's 3, 4, 5 dominant features of any one model, any one decision that are exported. And that helps people get comfortable with why a decision was made and making it explainable to the customer, as well as explainable to our colleagues. And we can demonstrate how the model has been trained from previous decisions which may have been made by humans, or indeed just precedent that's set by the book and how it exists at large, as well as advantages that we can have by having a sort of neutral party in a machine learning technique run a slide rule over the data, where it might be able to find duplicates or indeed find relationships in the data that haven't been spotted previously. And that can help in fraud, in money laundering, in transactional monitoring, lots of different areas where manual techniques had established ways of spotting problems or indeed financial crime, but they wouldn't flex quickly enough to be able to cope with an ever-changing landscape. That's also true in credit risk, where obviously the macroeconomic situation can move very quickly, as it has done with COVID. And so being able to sort of feed data in that represents these situations and allows the models to adapt over time, people can help see both an upside to using technology, the pace and the scale that it can move at, but also they can have explainability and a sort of simplicity to it by having the models give outputs that makes that possible for human comprehension and simple conversational relay of the decisions, which is crucial in a relationship-led approach that we have in a corporate bank like ours.
I agree, especially around the ability to iterate quickly, as that's so important to achieving a result, as well as providing transparency to that result by allowing for data conditions to be adjusted and course corrected as necessary.
Yeah, and it's an iterative process, right? We don't train humans once and then say to them, okay, we're never training you ever again. We have continuous learning and continuous professional development in most careers and in most areas of work, and we expect people to continue to read and learn and understand. And it's no different with machine learning. You know, we don't just train it once. We continue to monitor the performance control, to inform it and to add to that training, move quickly on it, and understand what it's doing over time.
Absolutely. Many people often fall into the trap of simply having humans in the loop at the beginning, but not entirely through the full data lifecycle. And that's really where a lot of additional value can be found as well.
Indeed.
So as Jonathan's just shown, there's a need for clean, mastered data throughout the customer lifecycle. I'd now like to take a moment to look at how Tamr provides a modern customer mastering experience. The advent of machine learning in the enterprise has presented new opportunities for companies to make use of their data, with a lot of initial focus in the analytics space. Many companies have established data science practices whose role is to take this data and use it to produce those analytic insights. What often happens, though, is that the data scientists spend the majority of their time locating data, unifying it from multiple sources, and cleaning it before they can even get started on building the desired analytics. Simply put, the data is not in a state to use without placing the analytic impact at risk. Such efforts are often carried out as a one-off task for a particular deliverable, meaning that new analytic needs will often require the same process to be run again, or even worse, recreated from scratch. Deploying a human-guided machine learning solution offers an opportunity to dramatically improve this scenario. Users can now set up repeatable pipelines which use the capabilities of machine learning to overcome common data quality issues and data integration challenges. Such a workflow also opens up the power of machine learning to additional personas such as the data curator, who is responsible for providing data which is fit for purpose, as well as the subject matter expert, whose knowledge can be captured and institutionalized within the machine learning model without having to write code. Such a feedback cycle can continue from model development through to production. As Jonathan mentioned, the need to iterate is there, and users can be alerted of data conditions which may require further input and course control. The result of this is that the data science team is freed up from the task of cleaning data and can focus their efforts on consuming the outputs rather than wrestling with the data itself. I'd now like to talk about a recent customer mastering engagement with a leading US-based insurance company. They had recently embarked on an initiative to improve their customer marketing efforts by making better use of enrichment data. This required constructing views of their customers at the individual, household, and organizational levels, and matching them up with referential data sourced from a wide variety of external data vendors. Their existing system was using a legacy rules-based approach, which was very static and was proving to be very difficult to extend to accommodate new sources. Problems were occurring both in terms of the data variety, because those rules to match the data were embedded into the code itself, as well as with the data volume, where performance had run into reliability issues due to the scale of data exceeding over 300 million records. This led to the need to carefully monitor production deployment, as failures frequently occurred. Internal prototypes have been constructed by a data science team, which received buy-in for a machine learning-based approach. But there was also the goal to empower other teams to be able to provide feedback to the models being developed. A key part of the design of the new deployment was to make full use of the customer's cloud infrastructure in order to provide additional performance gains in a budget-friendly manner. Tamr's solution was an ideal fit for this use case. The team was able to take advantage of Tamr's platform to establish matching models at multiple levels of granularity. The ability to assign subject matter experts items to review offered the opportunity to improve the performance of the model and gain trust in its output without having to write code to apply their matching logic. And rather than consider the integration of new sources as an onerous task, they can now be onboarded in a more agile manner, with previous learnings applied to reduce the integration time and cost. The Tamr solution is deployed natively in the customer's AWS cloud environment, which brings cost savings by making use of ephemeral resources for the compute tasks that are performed when data is refreshed. In addition, the deployment was able to be scaled from a small instance used for initial development and prototyping through to a more substantial footprint as data volumes increased. The net result of this is that the customer now has a platform to reliably provide data to support their customer analytics needs today and can grow to accommodate new data sources while maintaining a robust matching process that is trusted by those consuming the data. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan, for walking us through the customer journey at Santander. And so with that, now I'd like to pass back to Fred to take some questions from the audience.
How important is culture in implementing digital transformation projects? Has there been a long-term culture of innovation at Santander UK?
So I think culture is very important in digital transformation. Not least, you're going to be changing materially the way people are going to be working, and therefore people have to be brought into it. And also there has to be a drive from the top to inspire the motivation to engage in digital transformation. People are inherently sort of nervous about change and what that might mean. And so it has to have clear direction and business outcome focused goals that aren't just about maybe efficiency, automation, or cost saving. You have to have a customer proposition that you want to be able to create, and you have to be able to use technology in a positive way to be able to create that in a way that genuinely helps your colleagues and your customers' problems and help and enabling them to operate the business that you want to in a better manner. If you can achieve those things and make it clearly articulated, that's when people's buy-in will be easier to achieve, and the digital transformation that you're undertaking, which ultimately becomes a people, culture, and business operating model transformation, more successful.
Thank you. What advice do you have to offer your digital transformation peers who want to achieve quick wins while also building a foundation to solve long-term challenges?
So I've got two main pieces of advice. I would pick a cloud architecture that helps you move away from legacy architecture so you can move in quicker, more iterative sprints and potentially build upon with partners that are integrated into that ecosystem. I've chosen Salesforce with Encino as the center of the new architecture that I've created, but there are many alternatives to that. But you should just make a conscious choice to be able to have something modern and flexible that you can work with as a new foundation, adjacent to what perhaps you've had in place in the past, rather than trying to replace it or migrate legacy technology, which can be expensive, slow, and potentially high risk. I would also then advise that integrating with legacy tech is best achieved either via RPA and potentially utilizing user interfaces and front ends that the legacy technology might have. And that's a good way of operationalizing and automating processes that exist in and around those legacy systems. And then otherwise extracting data into a data lake. The data tables that underpin a legacy system might be the sort of link that you need into that system. The data in it might be the most valuable thing. And simply by extracting that into one place that can have modern connectors, such as APIs into your cloud-based architecture to view, visualize, and analyze that data, that will be very important normally to underpin a single customer view and a digital transformation that can use the data and the infrastructure that already exists in the business.
Great. What's your proudest achievement in leading Santander UK through its digital transformation projects?
So we've been fortunate enough to win a number of global technology banking awards for the projects that delivered the digital onboarding and the digital credit journeys that I showed during the presentation. The Salent Model Bank Award we've won for both corporate lending in 2020, and we won for corporate digital onboarding in 2019. And those are probably among the most prestigious prizes in global banking technology. And so to win in two different categories 2 years in a row is a fortunate and I felt to be a great achievement by the team who's helped deliver these projects over the last couple of years.
And when implementing digital transformation projects, processes are usually more important than technology. How would you recommend addressing process change, and how do you get internal buy-in?
Yeah, this is a key question and one I address most importantly structurally in my team. We're a business-led transformation unit and a sort of a hybrid technology team with business input and a business reporting line. And I make sure that each of the team leaders in my department have domain expertise and knowledge and experience, which means they understand inherently the risks and the nature of work that needs to be undertaken within their particular domain. They understand the stakeholders and their incentives, their traditional processes, and so that they can speak to the needs of those areas as well as the problems they might have with the existing technology and the way they conduct their processes today. And they can help create better solutions to that, understanding the first principles which often need to be resorted to when digitally transforming something. If you put in place in digital technology the same process that you have today, you would have never come up with things like the parallel e-signature and robotic process automation process that underpins our onboarding process now. And that buys us time in the process, which helps deliver far better customer outcomes. If we'd stuck with the linear way, the form was sent out to the customer today, signed, passed around the office to be signed by lots of people on the mandate, and then sent back in before the clock started ticking, we would have had similar, maybe faster performance, but similar performance and structure to the process that we had. But by going back to first principles, by looking at what was possible using the technology, we found a simple way to run two stages of the process in parallel and deliver a better customer outcome.
And the final question is, what are the biggest challenges your team has faced when forced to adapt to working remotely?
Yeah, so my team has been spread over the country with the geographical diversity that we have in the UK as a business at Santander. And I've tried to make sure that my team is present in the offices of our main stakeholders, and there's many different departments across the country with which we have to interact and that are involved in the end-to-end processes that we're trying to digitize and improve. So we've been used to working digitally and remotely and communicating for a long period of time, and the nature of the technology that we're employing, as well as the communication methods that we use, are inherently online and digital and remote, and allow access from anywhere. And so we haven't had to flex too dramatically during this crisis. What's had to happen, though, is that we've had the rest of the business had to catch up with our way of working and our structure of our team very quickly. And that's made rolling out new technologies, training, engaging with the teams that were based around the country but now based at home. That's made that slower and more delicate task. So we've had to really focus on how to make training sessions, WebExes, demonstrations, Zoom calls engaging, how to reinforce learning, how to make videos available for people as reference guides to go back to, and how to make sure that people feel able to ask questions like they would organically in a classroom perhaps based training environment as we're rolling out new technologies. I think we've done that reasonably well so far, and it's something that we continue to challenge ourselves on. But as with all human communication, you can't ever be too good at it, and it's something you need to emphasize and focus on in the team as digital transformation manifests, because, as I say, in the end, everything's a people transformation.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for your time, and Ravi for serving as moderator. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you very much.